You wake up drained, even after a full 8 hours of sleep. You can't lock onto a single thought for more than 3 minutes. You pick up your phone just to check the time, and somehow 30 minutes vanish into the void of endless scrolling. There's this gnawing restlessness, like something is permanently, invisibly missing, and you tell yourself, I'm just exhausted. But what if I told you, you're not exhausted at all? You're overstimulated. Your brain is literally drowning, and the scary part, you might not even realize how deep you already are. The average American unlocks their phone 96 times a day. That's once every 10 minutes they're awake. And neuroimaging studies out of Stanford have revealed something even more alarming. The brain of a heavy social media user doesn't just look like an addicted brain, it is one. The same reward circuits that light up for cocaine, they fire for a notification too. But here's the real question: why did we end up like this? And more importantly, is there actually a way out? The answer came from a 500-year-old warrior code, and it starts with one man's breaking point. Tr1 T. Bracken Kane was 34, project manager at a tech firm in Austin, Texas. On paper, he was successful, respected, and rising, the kind of guy colleagues pointed to and said, that's who you want to be. But something had quietly started rotting from the inside. Projects piled up unfinished. Books were abandoned after a few chapters. Conversations would slip out of his grip mid-sentence. And the thing that scared him most, he couldn't feel anything anymore. Food was tasteless. Music was just noise in the background. Even moments that used to mean something felt completely flat. It was like someone had slowly turned the volume of his entire life down to 20%, and he hadn't even noticed until it was nearly silent. Then came the nights. He'd wake at 3 a.m. just to use the bathroom, grab his phone to check the time and blink. Suddenly it's 5:30 a.m., 2.5 hours swallowed by TikTok videos of strangers doing things he didn't even care about. And the question that haunted him, the one he couldn't escape, was simple. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because the answer didn't come from a therapist, a productivity app, or a self-help book. It came from a random YouTube video about samurai. Heiti Parasti Kididivarai. One Saturday afternoon, deep in a procrastination spiral, Kane stumbled onto a video about Bushido, the ancient Japanese code of the warrior class. And one single line stopped him cold. A samurai who cannot control his own mind is already dead, even if his heart still beats. He paused. Read it again, and in that moment something cracked open. He was breathing, his heart was beating. But his mind had been hijacked. He wasn't living, he was being lived, pulled from impulse to impulse like a puppet on invisible strings. That night, Kane made a decision. He was going to find out exactly how those warriors trained their minds and bring that ancient system into his modern life. Not to become a monk or a philosopher, but simply to sit in a chair and read 20 pages of a book without feeling like he was about to explode. What he found next would change absolutely everything. Hair Pillawam. Tamp. The first concept Kane uncovered was called Mushin, Japanese for empty mind or mind without ego. In combat, a samurai in Mushin didn't think about his next move. He simply moved. Without hesitation, without fear, without clinging to any particular outcome. The mind was fully present yet completely untangled from emotion. And here's the insight that hit Kane like cold water. Mushin isn't about crushing your impulses. It's about watching them without letting them drive. Every time the urge to grab his phone hit, that physical itch, that almost panicked need, Kane used to have only two options: give in immediately, or white-knuckle his way through willpower that lasted maybe 4 minutes before collapsing. Mushin offered a third way. Observe the craving like a cloud drifting across the sky. No fighting, no feeding it, just watching. And science backs this completely. Research from Yale showed that consciously observing a craving rather than suppressing it reduces its intensity by up to 60%, because suppression feeds the urge with resistance while observation simply starves it of oxygen. Kane practiced this every time an impulse hit. Snacks, videos, anything. He'd sit, breathe, watch, and ask himself, where do I feel this in my body? What story is my brain telling me right now? The first few days he mostly caved, but something had already shifted. He was no longer on autopilot. The process had become conscious, and that small shift was the crack in the wall. But observing impulses was only the beginning, because Kane was about to discover something far more uncomfortable and far more powerful. The samurai had a practice called Shugyo, austere training, deliberate discomfort, meditation under icy waterfalls in winter, prolonged fasting, forced marches, sitting in silence for hours. They didn't seek suffering for its own sake. They understood something profound: excessive comfort destroys the will. When you're never cold, your body forgets how to adapt. When you're never hungry, food loses its meaning. And when you're never truly, deeply bored, you lose the ability to simply be with yourself. Let me ask you something directly. When was the last time you were genuinely bored? No music, no podcast, no scrolling, nothing between you and your own thoughts. For most people, the honest answer is I can't remember. And that's the crisis hiding in plain sight. So Kane built his modern version of Shugyo, not icy waterfalls, but something arguably harder for a person living today to one-day dopamine detox. The rules were brutal in their simplicity. No social media, no streaming, no adult content, no video games, no passive background music, and phone on airplane mode every night at 8 p.m. No exceptions, no negotiation. What remained was books, walks, real conversations, cooking and silence. The first 3 days nearly broke him. He wrote in his journal, "My brain is screaming. I pick up my phone reflexively about 40 times a day and remember there's nothing there. I feel angry at myself, at the world, at everything. My mind feels like a child throwing a tantrum." And here's exactly what was happening neurologically. Because this is the part most people never hear, so stay with me. For years, Kane's brain had been flooded with artificial dopamine spikes dozens of times every single day. Every notification, every like, every autoplay video was essentially a tiny chemical injection. Over time, his dopamine receptors had become downregulated. His brain, flooded beyond capacity, had quietly turned down its own sensitivity just to survive the flood. The result was that he needed bigger and bigger doses just to feel anything at baseline. So when Kane cut the supply, his brain went into withdrawal, exactly like a drug addict detoxing. This is the part where people quit. This is where most detox attempts collapse, not because the person is weak, but because nobody warned them the darkness was coming. But Kane had a weapon most people don't, a samurai concept called Gaman, enduring the unbearable with dignity. Not pretending it doesn't hurt, not suppressing the pain, but acknowledging it fully and choosing to walk through it with honor anyway. And on day 5, something THT on M and Piety day 5, Kane's journal entry ready. "Today I read 15 pages of a book. It sounds pathetic, but it's more than I've read in the past 6 months combined. Day 8, went for a walk without headphones. 40 minutes alone with my thoughts. First pure agony, then peace. I noticed things I pass every day and have never actually seen. A tree blooming, a dog playing. It sounds ridiculous, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Presence. I cooked dinner slowly. I smelled the garlic frying. I ate without a screen in front of me. The food had flavor. I don't remember the last time something actually tasted like something." His brain was recalibrating. Research confirms that after just 2 to 4 weeks of abstinence from an artificial dopamine source, the brain begins restoring its baseline sensitivity, and simple things start delivering real pleasure again. Not the hollow simulation of a scroll. But Kane had discovered one more pillar, and this one is what separated his approach from every failed detox he'd ever tried before. Then Bunbu Ryōdō in Bushido, there was a concept called Bunbu Ryōdō, the two-way path of balance between Bu, the art of war, and Bun, the art of letters, intellect, and creation. A warrior who only fought was considered a barbarian. One who only studied was considered fragile. True mastery demanded both action and reflection, strength and wisdom. And Kane realized this was the fatal flaw in every detox he'd ever seen. They only remove. They create a vacuum. And vacuums by nature pull you straight back in. So instead of just cutting, Kane substituted with intention. He deleted TikTok and added 30 minutes of reading before sleep. He removed Netflix binging and enrolled in a cooking course. He killed the morning scroll and replaced it with exercise. He silenced the background noise and added 10 minutes of morning meditation. He wasn't just detoxing, he was rebuilding. Not consuming content about skills, but actually building them with his hands, through trial and error, through failure and repetition. For the first time in years, Kane was creating instead of just consuming. The moment off day 21 arrived, and Kane's final journal entry didn't describe some dramatic transformation. It described something quieter and somehow more powerful. "I'm not a different person. The impulses are still there. The temptations are real, but something fundamental has shifted. I have a choice again. Before it was automatic, see notification, click, feel bored, grab phone. Now there's a gap, one breath between the impulse and the action, and in that one breath, I can actually choose." He didn't throw his phone away, he didn't swear off Netflix forever, he didn't move to a monastery. He simply became the master of his tools instead of their servant. Andrew Huberman of Stanford puts it plainly: constant artificial dopamine spikes don't increase your capacity for pleasure. They increase your baseline requirement, meaning you need more and more stimulation just to feel normal. Lembke adds the devastating irony: the relentless pursuit of pleasure leads directly to anhedonia, the clinical inability to feel pleasure at all, because the brain requires contrast and needs valleys to experience peaks. And Newport summarizes it this way: boredom isn't the enemy, boredom is the soil where profound thought grows, and every significant idea in human history was born in a mind that had space and silence to think. The samurai had no universities, no neuroscientists, but through generations of deep observation of the human mind, they arrived at identical conclusions to those modern science is only now confirming. Let's bring it all together. Mushin teaches you to observe your urges without obeying them, to create one breath of space between stimulus and response, because in that space your freedom lives. Shugyo reminds you to deliberately court discomfort, because your self-control is a muscle that only grows under tension and you must stop protecting it from every difficulty. Bunbu Ryōdō commands you to never just remove but always replace. For every habit you cut, plant something that builds, because otherwise the vacuum wins. And Gaman prepares you for the truth that the first days will be brutal, and you must accept that without running, without complaining, without playing the victim, because transformation lives exactly on the other side of that discomfort. Here's the deepest truth about all of this. A samurai didn't fear the sword. He trained with it until the sword became an extension of his will, not the other way around. You don't need to escape technology. You need to train yourself until technology serves you, until you are its master and not its hostage. You're not tired, you never were, you're overstimulated, and now you have the code to take your mind back. So tell me, are you ready to take the 21-day challenge? What's the first trigger you're removing? Drop it in the comments, because that one comment might be the moment you look back on as the day everything changed. See you in the next one.